If I could tell the story in words, I wouldn't need to lug around a camera. An organization called the National Child Labor Committee, or NCLC, hired an American sociologist and photographer named Hines to document and expose the realities of child labor in the United States. The NCLC was an organization committed to eliminating child labor and enhancing the welfare of children through advocacy. The Industrial Revolution caused more factories to emerge. These factories needed labor workers, so they would employ children because they did not require high salaries. Children faced many hardships. They often worked long hours, up to 12 to 16 hours a day, with only one day off per week. Because of this, they had very little time to do things that children should do, such as rest, play, or even have an education. They received very meager wages. The pay was insufficient to meet the children's basic needs. Many of the factories, such as mines and mills, that the children worked in were very dangerous, and the children faced the constant risk of accidents and injuries, and some children were even exposed to harmful substances. A census taken in 1900 revealed that approximately 2 million children were working in mills, mines, fields, factories, stores, and city streets. This report caused widespread concern and promoted a growing awareness to the harsh working conditions faced by child laborers during the early 20th century. Efforts to address the issue of child labor and improve the working conditions for young workers began. Advocacy groups, social reformers, and labor unions also began forming. The children worked in these conditions all over America. Many people even supported child labor, including parents and employers. On the parents' side, they believed that sending their kids to work in these factories and mills would build character and help with skill developments. Another reason, and the main reason, was because these families were poverty-stricken and needed the extra money sending their kids to work would get. Employers, on the other hand, abused the idea of child labor. They seen it as a way to cheat the system. By hiring children, they would pay them less than the adults, and they knew that the children would be more manageable and the children were less likely to strike compared to an adult worker. With the goal to change the perception of the people who supported the labor, Hines would interview and take pictures of the children as they were working. He interviewed and took pictures of over 5,000 children, and he would later go on to publish his findings in various progressive magazines and newspapers. These pictures would be the backbone that changed the public perception of child labor forever. But on the opposite side, there were also many who disapproved of the idea of child labor. Reformists opposing the idea believed that the long hours of premature toil and the deprivation of education, which not only caused a wide array of health problems, but it also caused the children working their future, because these children were so deprived of their education that they were not learning enough to break the cycle of poverty-stricken families, was only harming the future of America. Reformists and activists all agreed when they said that child labor takes a toll on the child's intellectual, physical, and psychological health, whether or not the rest of America would acknowledge the fact. Hines once said, "There is work that profits children, and there is work that brings profit only to the employers. The object of employing children is not to train them, but to get high profits from their work." When Lewis joined the NCLC, he joined to enlighten Americans to the truth of child labor. He seen that society as a whole did nothing to stop this, nor did the politicians. So as an investigative photographer, he began his journey to end child labor. He went to work in mines, factories, sweatshops, all just to document the children's lives. He would go to Louisiana to visit oyster chuckers, Pennsylvania to visit coal mines, North Carolina to visit textile mills, and Colorado to visit beet farms. While photographs may not lie, liars may photograph. Hines would take his portrait photos of the children in a technique that would make the viewer of the photograph feel like the photograph is personal. He would put the focus of the photograph mainly on the child, and to do this, he would blur their working place in the background. He would also take the picture at the child's eye level so that the viewer of the picture would be making eye contact with the child. Whenever Hines would take a portrait of a child, he would ask them a little about themselves, their wages, and working conditions. And sometimes the children would show Hines their injuries and tell him how they got them. This picture is of a boy named Henry when he was only 10 years old. At the time of this picture, he has been working as an oyster chucker every day before and after school since he was 7. Henry was one of the few children fortunate enough to still be able to go to school. Lewis Hines conveyed shared working conditions through repeated scenes, capturing similar moments in different places with different workers, emphasizing widespread labor challenges. For example, look at these pictures. They are of 2 different workers working in almost the same conditions. They are both working in mills that are all over the United States. More than just pictures, these images were a driving force for change. Hines' photographs played a crucial role in raising awareness about the exploitation of young workers, leading to a collective call for reform. The photographs caught the attention of millions of people around the country. In order to show their disapproval, many people joined advocacy programs, participated in protests against child labor, and spread awareness. The public efforts caused by the photography of Lewis Hines led to increased awareness about child labor and led to the creation of many reforms that aimed at ending child labor.
80s. Lewis Hines was probably another leading figure because of the work that he did with photography. Because around the turn of the 20th century, when film became pliable and photography exploded with Kodak, he used cameras to go into the factories and the mills and the mines and use a visual portrayal of the suffering of children. And that was really transformative in the way that people understood child labor and how much attention the cause got. So what happened?
Perhaps you are weary of child labor pictures. Well, so are the rest of us. But we propose to make you and the whole country so sick and tired of the whole business that when the time for action comes, child labor pictures will be records of the past. Due to growing concerns regarding child labor, the Keating-Owen Act was passed by the U.S. Congress in 1916. Sponsored by Senator Edward Keating and Representative Robert Owen, the legislation aimed to regulate child labor by prohibiting the sale of goods produced by children across states. The act aimed to ensure the safety and well-being of young workers by setting minimum age requirements for employment. However, in 1918, the Supreme Court declared the act unconstitutional in the Hammer v. Dagenhart case, stating that it exceeded Congress's regulatory powers. This decision proved to be a setback for the efforts to address child labor at the federal level until subsequent legislative initiatives were taken. But Lewis Hines and the other advocates trying to end child labor did not give up. Lewis continued to expose child labor through various ways. While he still used photography as his main way to shed light on the truth, he also began to speak publicly in forms of lectures to teach the people what was really going on. He also wrote many articles while still adding in his photographic work and used writings that could better explain what was happening in the pictures. And not only did he begin to collaborate more with other social reformers and activists to build a network of support for his cause, he also was very persistent in advocating for better legislation to be ran. Finally, the efforts of Lewis Hines became visible. After the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed in 1938, the Supreme Court reversed its decision on its previous opinions on the Keating-Owen Act in the Hammer v. Dagenhart case, and said that Congress does have the power to regulate child labor as specified in the Fair Labor Standards Act. Today, both the Fair Labor Standards Act and the Keating-Owens Act are in use. The Wage and Hour Act was created alongside the enactment of the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. It established the minimum age, overtime pay, record keeping, and child labor standards affecting full-time and part-time workers. The child labor presentation in the Fair Labor Standards Act ensured that young people who worked were safe and their health, education, and well-being were not being jeopardized. Finally, the efforts of Lewis Hines became visible. Thanks to the advocacy and dedication of individuals like Lewis Hines, children all over America now enjoy greater protection and opportunities for a safer and more brighter future.